Heroes created by people's imagination live and commit their acts of bravery in our program, The Legend of Kazakhs. Legends are an invaluable cultural heritage passed down from generation to generation. Since olden days, the Kazakh people were known for their songs, legends, and tales. These legends were born when the steppe morning sun with its rays overflowed the vast plain. When the velvet night sky, spangled with millions of twinkling stars, and when the low hills were giving away to glorious cold mountains and dull salines, to the steppe flowers. These legends always reflect the great events of people's lives. In these legends, heroes created by the people's imagination live and perform their great deeds. And we are going to tell you about one of those legends, the legend of the amazing Kayindy Lake. High in the mountains, where icy mountain peaks almost touched the soft white clouds, there was a big white yurt. And it was so big that the entire village could fit in there. But for a family living in it, it didn't seem so huge, because they were very tall. A mother and her 2 sons living in that yurt were giants. And every day, the mother raised her hands to the sky and thanked Almighty God for these 2 sons. The eldest son, Dandai, was growing like weeds and became strong and brave like a batir, with a sincere heart and warm spirit. And his younger brother, Kambar, was cheerful and witty. This way they lived in harmony and love until the dark haze came upon their land. The mountains were rocked with the rattle of hooves. All the plains were stunned by crying and groaning, and bonfires were blazed up, while strangers came into their dear land. Dandai changed his clothes and put on his warrior's armor. At dawn he left home, leaving his weeping mother and youngest brother. Dandai kept going tirelessly on and on, day and night, until he saw the ruined villages and the outsiders riding their fast and strong horses, intoxicated with blood and greed. They grinned and laughed, knowing that they were unbeatable. There are thousands of them. Dandai is alone, even though he is a giant. And Dandai accepted that this was an unequal battle. The moon rose, and then the sun, the moon, and the sun again, and he was still fighting with clouds of enemies. On the 3rd day only, when the bloody sunlight lit up the valley, Dandai could see that the whole plain was covered with his enemies' bodies. Dandai was seriously injured in the battle. His leg was fractured and bleeding heavily, but his heart was strong. His homeland was free of enemies, and finally, he could sigh with relief. Gathering all of his courage and conquering the pain, Dandai went back home. The longer he went, the less strong he stayed, and his eyes were bleary while his legs hurt unbearably. Suffering from his injuries and fatigue, Dandai fell to the ground, breaking hardy pines and century-old spruce trees. The giant tried to heal his leg in vain. Then Dandai laid on the ground and lost track of time. His thirst began to torment him. A river was running right beside him, which was so narrow and fleet that it was impossible to drink from for such a giant. Then Dandai, barely sitting with one hand, seized the top of the mountain with the other, and with incredible effort, he pulled out the mountain. The earth shook and the falling stones blocked the snaky river. The water began to flood into the valley and pine forest, forming a lake. The giant was about to drink, but sticking out from the water were pine trees which hurt his face. And then Dandai broke several tree trunks and quenched his thirst until he was fully satisfied. After drinking the water, he felt better, but his soul pined in grief, longing for home and his mother, as well as his younger brother, whom he might never see again. The deep yearning stamped his face with gray mourning, and he became quiet like the silent mountains surrounding him. He knew that his sufferings will last forever, and he will become overgrown with moss and trees until his dying day. Dandai had no memory of how many years had passed since he was lying there without movement. And he thought he had almost died when he heard one's feet thudding and the muffled noise of crumbling stones. Dandai could barely open his eyes when the shining sun dazzled him and a huge shadow fell on him. Immediately, he recognized his younger brother, Kambar, who had grown to be a real warrior. Dandai moved his lips, but since he was silent for so long, he could only produce a plangent groan. Kambar heard it and turned around, peering into the large hill. He realized that this huge mountain was his brother Dandai. He ran towards him and shouted with joy. Kambar mopped his forehead, and he crossed many roads, mountains, and steppe until he found his brother. He always believed that he would find his brother Dandai. He pat Dandai on his shoulder and took him home to their mother. When they appeared from afar, their mother ran towards her sons and kissed them. The mother didn't leave Dandai's side, and she gave him warm kumis and applied herbs to his leg. Dandai's leg healed quickly and his strength recovered. Joy and peace finally returned to their home. A lot of time has passed since then, and only the lake with its pine trees remembers the great giant and his brother who came to his aid. A force of nature created the incredible landscapes of Chon Urakti. This gorge is above the lake surface, and the tops of the spruce trees rise out like masts of sunken ships. But under the turquoise water, you can find the well-preserved branches and needles. The sunken trees are just part of the picturesque landscape. From a geological point of view, this lake is young. It was created due to the landslide of limestone rocks, and it was formed due to a rockfall. During an earthquake, the river was blocked by a natural dam. Subsequently, the water filled the area between the high cliffs. The perennial Tian Shan spruce trees grew up alongside it. As a result, the river suddenly became flooded. However, the trunks of the strong trees were not rotted over time and remained standing, rising stately above the surface of the lake. This place is located 2,000 meters above sea level, and the water is so cold that, in fact, it preserved the trees. Kayindy became well known thanks to its submerged trees. These spruce trees were compared with the masts of sunken ships, with ancient guardians of the lake. It is not surprising that there is a feeling of complete timelessness, as if time has stopped a long time ago between the whitish stems of the thinned trees. The most fascinating thing is that the branches of the spruce giants overgrown with slime are visible through the water. Kayindy is locked into the rocky hills that give even greater originality to the lake. Kayindy is a lake which changed its color depending on the time of the year as well as the weather. The water color varies from pale blue to dark blue. This feature allows to take a new look at the lake every time, revealing new verges of its beauty. In the cold streams of the lake, you can still find trout. In the winter, the surface of the lake freezes up with a crust of ice. Sticking out of the water, the naked tops of century-old Tian Shan spruce trees create a very special, indescribable impression of some mystery, as if time itself had stopped for eternity. Kayindy will not leave anyone indifferent. This lake is a pearl of Kazakhstan, and having been there once, it will forever stay in your memory. Not surprisingly, this lake is surrounded by many legends and tales. Its exceptional beauty constantly awakens the imagination of its visitors. In the next program, we will unravel the amazing legend, perhaps about the most exotic creation of nature, which you can visit and stay entranced for a long time: the legend of Sharin Canyon.